Steelers Nation, hold tight, because what came out of this post-game breakdown hits hard and makes it clear just how big the storm inside the organization really is. The loss in Chicago wasn't just another stumble on the road. It was the kind of matchup that exposes where this team is sharp, where there's still room to grow, and, most importantly, where the mistakes are costing way too much in this critical final stretch. Every missed adjustment, every execution slip, and every drive that fails to stretch the field paints a picture far more urgent than it seems. And that's exactly why you, black and gold faithful, need to be part of this conversation. What came out of this breakdown hits you right away because every detail in that post-game evaluation pulls you straight into what the Steelers are wrestling with internally right now. The loss in Chicago wasn't just another close defeat on the road. It was the kind of game that exposes exactly where this team is sharp, where it still has potential, and where it simply cannot afford to keep slipping as the final stretch of the season closes in. And when you look closely at everything that happened, from Mason Rudolph's limitations to the defensive inconsistencies to the glaring absence of any real vertical threat in the passing game, the picture becomes much clearer, and honestly, a lot more urgent. Tomlin didn't come out of the press room with many surprises in terms of injuries. Broderick Jones's issue being classified as a stinger was about the only new detail worth noting, and even that came with the usual Tomlin reminder that Tuesday will bring fuller updates. Joey Porter Jr.'s hip flexor will get more evaluation, James Pierre will be reassessed, and the team will wait on all of that. But there was one line that instantly changed the tone of the entire week. Tomlin anticipates Aaron Rodgers returning versus Buffalo. That one sentence shifts the whole arc of this season, because the difference between what the offense looks like with Rodgers and what it looked like today with Rudolph is the difference between a team that can punch back against playoff contenders and a team that gets stuck underneath its own ceiling. And that ceiling was on full display. Mason Rudolph is who he's always been, steady underneath, shaky downfield, limited when the defense knows he has to throw, efficient on short, safe completions, but almost non-existent when the ball needs to travel 10+ yards in the air. One completion on 6 attempts in those situations, an interception, and another throw that could have easily been picked. That is the exact opposite of what this team needs when its receivers are winning one-on-one matchups and the Bears are daring you to take shots. Fans spent the week convinced Rudolph could unlock the deep game, and in the moment where the game begged for that aggressiveness, it simply wasn't there. It wasn't only the deep misses, though, it was the processing, the clock mismanagement on the final drives, the unwillingness to throw the ball away, the lack of pressure awareness, the illegal formation where Rodgers called it out from the sideline while Rudolph snapped it anyway. Plays like that aren't about talent, they're about command. They're about instinct. They're about having the ability to take control of the moment. Rodgers has it. Rudolph, for all the good he brings as a capable backup, does not. And that's why the offense looked the way it did. Wide distribution of targets with almost no production over 35 yards. Calvin Austin III was the only spark, not just by the numbers, but in separation, route detail, and the explosive DPI he forced deep. Roman Wilson, once again getting WR2 snaps, walked out of the game with 0 catches. That's not all on him. Rudolph missed him on the best route he ran all afternoon, but it reinforces the larger issue. The offense has speed but no vertical identity. Arthur Smith is trying to build everything off checkdowns and yards after catch, but without a real downfield threat, defenses aren't stressed. Everything stays condensed. Everything becomes harder. And yet, there were pieces that absolutely worked. The run game? Dominant. Nearly 200 yards on the ground. Jet sweeps hitting. The fake tush-push exploding. Spencer Anderson at fullback creating angles. Jalen Warren steady. Kenny Gainwell breaking free when it mattered. Against the Bills' defense that struggles against the run, that part of the Steelers' identity becomes a real advantage next week. Third downs were strong, red zone efficiency was perfect, and despite everything, the defense delivered 2 separate 3-and-out opportunities late to give the offense chances to tie or win the game. But potential without execution is the story of this Steelers season. The AFC North race is tightening. Baltimore holds the tiebreaker, for playoff-caliber teams remain on the schedule, and consistency, the inability to put together 4 quarters on both sides of the ball, is the one thing preventing this group from becoming as dangerous as their talent suggests they could be. Rodgers returning gives them a chance to fix the most obvious problem, but will it be enough to stabilize everything else? Before we continue into the deeper implications for the division race, the looming Bills matchup, and the pressure that's building inside the building, what do you, the fans, think about the quarterback situation right now based on everything this game revealed? Picking up right where we left off, the truth is that everything about this team's next 6 weeks hinges on whether the offense can finally look like a complete unit with Aaron Rodgers back under center. Because when you evaluate this stretch, Ravens twice, Bills, Lions, plus the must-win games against Miami and Cleveland, it becomes obvious that Pittsburgh doesn't have the luxury of easing into anything. Every flaw that showed up in Chicago will be magnified against postseason-level opponents, and every missed opportunity will carry real consequences in the AFC North standings. But here's the interesting part. Even with the frustrations, even with the inconsistency, you can still see why this staff believes the team has another gear. The structure of the offense is there when the quarterback can actually attack the field. The run game has become a legitimate strength, not an occasional weapon, but something that can dictate a matchup. And when you pair that with Rodgers' ability to manipulate defenders, to diagnose leverage, to push the ball deep when Calvin Austin III or Roman Wilson win downfield, the entire identity of the unit changes. Suddenly, those jet sweeps matter more. Suddenly, play action becomes dangerous. Suddenly, defenses can no longer sit on the short game and clock every window. The defense, too, showed the kind of resilience that keeps you in games even when things don't start well. 2 late 3-and-outs on the road, with the season momentum on the line, is the definition of a unit refusing to fold. And that's with Joey Porter Jr. dealing with a hip flexor, James Pierre coming out, and the secondary stretched thin. Once Alex Highsmith returns, once the rotation stabilizes, this defense has the potential to return to the level it showed earlier in the season, fast, disruptive, and physical at the point of attack. That's why the upcoming matchup with Buffalo becomes such a defining moment. The Bills struggle against the run, especially when offenses bring heavier personnel and force them into uncomfortable fits. The Steelers' surge on the ground suddenly isn't just a bright spot, it becomes a strategic advantage. And on the other side of the ball, Buffalo's lack of proven receiving threats gives Pittsburgh an opportunity to tighten coverage without exposing its safeties or asking too much of a banged-up cornerback group. In other words, stylistically, this is a game the Steelers can absolutely take, but only if they finally marry all the pieces at the same time. Because this is where the season shifts. If Pittsburgh goes 4-2 down the stretch, with even one win over Baltimore, they could very realistically win the division. The Ravens' schedule is brutal. Their offense hasn't looked sharp. They're surviving close games rather than controlling them. And divisional matchups always reset everything, especially when the Steelers are involved. That's why Week 18 at Acrisure is shaping up to be one of those nights that defines an entire era. 2 teams, 2 paths, 1 game deciding the division and possibly eliminating the loser entirely from the postseason picture. But none of that matters unless Pittsburgh finds consistency. That word has been hanging over this team all season. Rodgers returning helps solve the quarterback instability, but the bigger question is whether the offense can stop living in extremes. Strong run game 1 week, stagnant passing the next, defense dominant for stretches, then giving up chunk plays at the worst time, receivers winning early but disappearing late. For the Steelers to be the dangerous version of themselves, the version that can punch the Ravens in the mouth twice, can beat Buffalo, can outlast Detroit, can secure a home playoff game, they have to become a 4-quarter team. And the truth is, fans know this already. They've watched the flashes. They've watched the breakdowns. They've seen exactly what this roster looks like when it plays to its potential, and exactly what happens when it doesn't. That's why this final stretch is so intriguing, and honestly, why it's so hard to look away. It feels like the entire season is balancing on a knife's edge. At this point, with Rodgers expected back, the run game trending upward, the defense regaining health, and the division still wide open, do you think the Steelers can finally find the consistency that has eluded them all year? Continuing right from that point, the weight of this final stretch becomes even clearer when you look at how the Steelers have positioned themselves despite the chaos. For all the frustration fans have felt, the offensive stalls, the missed deep shots, the defensive lapses that appear only in the worst moments, this team has managed to stay in striking distance of the division without ever actually playing its best football. And that is exactly why the next few weeks feel so intense, because the window is still open, but nobody knows how long it will stay that way. The biggest hinge in all of this is Rodgers. His return doesn't just change the quarterback position, it changes the psychology of the offense. Receivers run routes differently when they know the ball can come at any moment. Coordinators call plays differently when they trust the quarterback to hit a one-on-one matchup without hesitating. Defenses play differently when a veteran who manipulates safeties with his eyes is standing across from them. It isn't just talent, it's authority, it's presence, it's control. And that's something the Steelers have been missing every time the offense hits those pockets of stagnation where they go drive after drive without threatening anyone vertically. Because here's the truth, the Steelers have a very real chance to take control of this season, but only if they solve the passing game. Calvin Austin III has proven he can win downfield. Roman Wilson has the speed to threaten defenses even when his stat lines don't reflect it. DK Metcalf, when teams aren't doubling him, still demands gravity. And yet, the offense remains compressed because defenses don't respect the deep shot. They sit on routes. They crowd spaces. They erase the easy yards. Rodgers changes that calculus the moment he steps on the field. Defensively, the narrative is similar. There are stretches, sometimes full quarters, sometimes full halves, where the Steelers look like a top-tier defensive unit. They fly around, force mistakes, and control the tone of the game. Then suddenly, in the most critical moment, the cohesion slips. A missed tackle here, a dropped interception there, a miscommunication that turns into a chunk play. It's not a structural failure, it's an execution failure. And that's what makes it so maddening, because execution can be fixed, but only if the urgency is there. And urgency is exactly what the schedule demands now. Buffalo, Detroit, Baltimore twice. These aren't games where you can ease into rhythm. These are games where one mistake can change the postseason picture completely. For Pittsburgh, winning 4 of the final 6, and at least 1 against the Ravens, is the simplest, clearest path to taking the AFC North. And when you break down Baltimore's remaining opponents, it's not unrealistic at all. They've been playing close games against teams they should control. Their offense hasn't looked sharp. Their defense has weaknesses that smarter offenses are starting to exploit. In other words, this race is far from decided. That brings us to the emotional weight of what Week 18 could become. A night game at Acrisure, the division on the line, the season on the line. Rodgers potentially leading the Steelers into a winner-take-all showdown while the Ravens try to avoid a collapse. 2 teams, 1 rivalry, 1 division title. The kind of atmosphere Pittsburgh lives for. The kind of moment fans talk about for years. But all of that only matters if the Steelers arrive at that game playing their best version of football, the version they've only shown in stretches, never in a full, complete performance. The margin for error is shrinking. The opportunity is enormous. And the identity of this team, for better or worse, is going to be revealed over the next few weeks. Now that Rodgers is expected back, now that the run game has become a strength, now that the defense is getting healthier, now that every game feels like a playoff game, how confident are you that the Steelers can finish strong? If you're still here with me, make sure you're subscribed, drop a like, and check out the videos on screen. And as always, let me know in the comments what you think this team is really capable of down the stretch. And as we push further into what this late season push really means, the pressure shifts from hypothetical scenarios to actual execution on the field. Every single drive, every defensive stand, every missed or made read becomes part of a much bigger equation now, because the AFC North is no longer a marathon. It has become a weekly sprint where the team that avoids blinking first will control January. That's why the coaching staff is pushing so hard behind the scenes for a level of consistency this roster hasn't yet shown. They know the pieces are there. They know the growth is real, but they also know the window to turn potential into production is shrinking. One of the most important elements this team has to sharpen is how it responds in tight late-game situations. Chicago exposed that again. 2 defensive stops in the final minutes should have been enough for at least a field goal drive to force overtime. Instead, 1 drive stalled under the weight of miscommunication, and the other evaporated because the quarterback failed to recognize leverage and missed a chance to hit Roman Wilson deep. Those are the exact sequences that separate playoff teams from early exits. Pittsburgh doesn't need perfection, nobody does, but it needs decisiveness. It needs clean operation. It needs a quarterback who sees the moment before it arrives and positions the offense to attack instead of react. This is where Rodgers changes the math. His experience in 2-minute situations, his command of protections, and his ability to manipulate defenders with his eyes transforms moments that once felt overwhelming into moments that feel controlled. When the offense breaks the huddle with him under center, the entire energy shifts. The playbook expands. The defense hesitates. And in the NFL, hesitation is the split second you need to flip a game. The run game, which has quietly turned into one of the best components of this roster, becomes even more dangerous with Rodgers threatening vertical shots. Jalen Warren's cutbacks, Gainwell's burst, and the creative use of jet sweeps with DK Metcalf create stress on second-level defenders, stress that multiplies when safeties can no longer cheat down to squeeze the box. It's the kind of balance Pittsburgh has been chasing for months. It's also the kind of balance that decides cold weather football in December and January. And defensively, the challenge is clear: finish. They've shown they can dominate stretches, but this final run demands closing speed, not just flashes of brilliance. Alex Highsmith returning should help regenerate the pass rush. Joey Porter Jr. getting healthy again gives them back their matchup corner. But the unit must eliminate the self-inflicted mistakes, the dropped interceptions, the missed opportunities that flip momentum. If this team wants to beat Baltimore, Buffalo, and Detroit, those margins become non-negotiable. This is the part of the season where identity becomes reality. No more talking about potential. No more pointing to flashes. It's about stacking quarters, stacking possessions, and stacking wins. It's about validating everything this roster believes about itself. And it's about proving to the rest of the league that Pittsburgh is not just a team with hopes, but a team built to take control of its path. Now the question becomes simple. With Rodgers expected back, with the run game in rhythm, with the division still within reach, and with every game from here on out carrying playoff implications, what version of the Pittsburgh Steelers will show up when it matters most? And as this narrative keeps unfolding, the central theme becomes impossible to ignore. The Steelers are hovering in that rare space where everything is still possible, yet nothing is guaranteed. This final stretch will not reward potential. It will reward precision. It will reward teams that can turn good moments into full games, and full games into momentum. And right now, Pittsburgh sits on the edge of becoming one of those teams, or one that lets the opportunity slip through its fingers. The schedule does them no favors, but the schedule also gives them every chance to define themselves. Buffalo tests their run game and their ability to keep defenses honest with a vertical threat. Detroit challenges their discipline, because the Lions' offense punishes every lapse in fundamentals. And the Ravens, twice, present the ultimate question. Can the Steelers impose their identity against a rival that is just as desperate, just as physical, and just as aware of what's at stake? These aren't just games. They're checkpoints that measure where the Steelers stand relative to the teams they want to beat in January. And while the loss in Chicago raised every red flag fans expected, it also exposed where the team is closer than people might think. The offensive line opened lanes consistently. The run game delivered a performance that would win most matchups on the schedule. The defense delivered when it absolutely had to. And with Rodgers returning, the pieces that appeared disjointed suddenly look like they could snap into place. The burden now shifts to execution under pressure. Drives like those final two in Chicago cannot happen again. Not if this team expects to win tight games against playoff-caliber opponents. The missed deep shot to Roman Wilson, and the way the entire offense tensed in